Now, the creative and arts sector has turned out to be one of the casualties of the COVID-19 pandemic, being forced to shut down. There's been controversy surrounding the distribution of the relief funding that was meant to support the sector during the lockdown. Well, tonight we turn our attention to Gauteng and unpack how the province has been helping affected artists and sports people. Bali Hlope, Gauteng Sports, Arts and Culture and Recreation MEC, joins us now to discuss this further. MEC, good evening and thank you very much for your time. Recognized as a top achiever or top performer in providing relief to artists, how do you account for that?
Hi, and hello to all your viewers. You'll know that Gauteng has a lot of the artists that are here and athletes who do reside here. So one of the things that we needed to do was to make sure that we set aside some funds to be able to cater to as many as we possibly could. It obviously is a tall order and we've not been able to capture everybody, but we are proud to know that at least what Gauteng was able to set aside does account for 44% of the national count.
Yeah. What is the nature of the relief that you offer to artists? I tell you what, because, for example, I was at the market the other day. It's still pretty much closed. There's been no production that has happened there. I speak to a number of artists in the country. None of them have received that amount of money. We know what happened at the NAC, for example, where they had to cut back on the budgets that they'd initially promised to about 700 or so artists that wanted to get that relief fund. So one sits back and says, but why would government be clapping for itself here that you've achieved well when artists have not really seen that achievement on the ground?
Well, I'm not sure. It depends who you're speaking to. But what I can indicate is that there's a lot of artists that applied, and a lot of them would confuse the provincial application with the national one and vice versa. So every province had its own applications that they had done for, and a call out that was done to the artists and athletes that reside within their provinces. Similarly, national had one also. And so what you do find is that a lot of people would have applied for the national one and assume it's the provincial one when it's not. So what we were targeting was essentially the people that were the ones who could be regarded as those that would fall through the cracks. So these are the people that are your coaches that train community teams, whether it's within soccer or whatever sporting code it may be, the people that train your conductors, the people that train your choirs, the artists that are within the communities and so forth. And those are the ones that we were targeting because National was looking more broadly. So we wanted to make sure that we are able to assist those that are really below at your foundation level, who tend to fall through the cracks because they're not protected by anything at all, and they really survive hand to mouth.
Yeah. And you're saying these are resources that were not coming from National. These were resources coming directly from province.
Yeah, it's an allocation that we had to make. So in the various meetings that we would have with the minister, we would discuss and we would report what we are going to be setting aside as provinces. So, for example, we had set aside 24 million, and that came in as part grant, which is the grant that comes from National, and part of it was from our voted funds, which are funds that do come, that we set aside that we can be able to utilize.
Yeah, it's the lack of transparency, I suppose, in the process of how beneficiaries then are selected and they benefit and who really they are. Because as you're saying, if you ask certain quarters, they'll tell you that we benefited, and if you ask other cohorts, they'll tell you we didn't. So and then you ask the question, so how come some did and some didn't? What was the criteria, and how did we get to the numbers that we got?
Yeah. So, the difficulty would be that, it's like if you consider housing, for example, there's a huge housing backlog and everybody wants houses, but not everybody's going to be able to be reached at the same time. There certainly will be probably later and so forth, but it's difficult. And that's why when I began, I indicated that we were able to touch as many as we could. And we're quite proud that it is 44% of the national count. However, we do acknowledge that it's not everybody that was able to receive it. So we had put in place very simple criteria that was there because like I was indicating earlier, that we were looking at those that are at your foundation, your elementary phases, those that are community practitioners. And we would say to them, you need to provide evidence that you are an artist, first and foremost, and that you are an athlete. And this could be done through providing some form of portfolio of evidence of the work that you have done previously. indicating how you're now not making any money and you're not receiving anything. So there's quite a number of things. And obviously, and then it's your regular documentation that speaks about whether a person is South African, whether they're from the province, and that type of stuff. So we worked together with our treasury in the province, and we were able to put together that criteria of things that they needed to submit. And it was quite a very lengthy process because we needed to make sure that, one, we are speaking to artists, because you remember that at the time of the hard lockdown, there was a huge outcry for funds. And that's when government also came up with the 350 Rand for individuals that are unemployed and so forth. So it could have been easy for individuals that are not even artists to want to apply for this under the guise that they are. So that's why we needed to make sure that there are stringent measures in place and forms of verification to ensure that we are giving to the right people, and certainly as people within our sectors.
MC, you're able to quantify the amount dispersed. I think you said 28, or is it 24 million?
We had set aside 24 million.
24 million. Are you able to tell us exactly to how many artists or athletes that amount has actually been dispersed to?
Yes. So if you look at the amounts that we're given, we gave out an amount of 6,000 per individual that would receive this. And also, let's be mindful that it really is assistance. And a lot of people would say to us, oh, but that's such a small amount and so forth. But well, you could look at it that way, but we say in comparison, if you consider that the people that were unemployed were receiving 350 Rand, and we were giving 6,000 per individual that could be able to show that they are an artist, they are an athlete, and you divide that by the amounts that we set aside, you're able to get an indication of just the number of people that we could be able to assist. And also, it's not supposed to be a salary, because it wasn't supposed to be that, but it really is aid for that difficult period where people were in. And so we really have been able to assist as many as we could. We are obviously looking into various ways now of how else can we able to make sure that we assist artists to be able to work, because we also don't want to create a culture of people just getting funds, but we really want, and a lot of artists were saying that yes, we understand you've been able to assist us and so forth, but create platforms for us to be able to do that which we love to do, which is to work, which is to perform and so forth. So that's what we're looking into with regards to even the work that we're doing within the department, within our targets, and how we can have greater integration of artists and athletes within the work we're doing.
That's indeed the next question that I was going to put to you. How are you ensuring that, for example, theatres are able to put out productions so that they retain jobs? Productions themselves are able to keep the artists at least salaried. Artists themselves are able to put out work at this particular point in time. What sort of support are you able to give them?
If you think about the market theatre as an example, or your museums also, because there are also other entities that have been struggling under this environment. There's very few travelers or people that are able to go within them. We are engaging with some of them that are privately owned. If you like the Apartheid Museum, your Lily's Leaf, which were also in the media, of how we can be able to assist them. But let me indicate, though, that the difficulty with privately owned entities or institutions is that we need to have an agreement in place into the workings and how government is going to have oversight, because once we give away funds, we must be able to report on them. Whether it's a Rand or it's 10 Rand, whatever it may be, we must be able to account, because we're dealing with public funds. So that's the difficulty with assisting private entities. But we are having engagements, especially like the ones that I am mentioning, your Lily's Leaf, your Apartheid Museum and so forth. We're having engagements with them, and especially their board of trustees as individuals who are accountable for the entities, on how, when we give them funds, what becomes the reporting measures, so that we don't see that which happened with Lily's Leaf as an example.
Right. MEC, I appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for today, and thank you very much for coming through. MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation there, Mbali Hlope, with us tonight.